Well, hello, that's me again. Today is the October 18th. It's Wednesday, I believe so. And it was bound to happen, and it did happen. And I'm talking about, of course, attack on the hospital in Gaza Strip. And I do not want to dwell here because I'm not atrocity porn addict as most of the corporate media are. And whatever the gag order they have from Mr. Biden, who, as we know, have been informed, quote unquote, by Pentagon, which, by the way, doesn't know, where his own butt is in the brightly lit room. But he said that that wasn't Israeli. Okay, sure, whatever. Just, we have one narrative of the other over the other narrative, and the counter narratives, and then some perpendicular narratives. But the only thing what we have now actually is a catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza, and of course we have now whatever the number of victims, innocent victims, civilians in this hospital. So, who did it? Well, obviously, make your own conclusions, and especially by the reaction of the United States, which is the main sponsor of Israel. But the point is, a week ago, when this whole thing started, I posted on my Vkontakte VK account this article. It was reprinted by one of the patriotic sites in Russia, but the title of this article on the 10th of October was I'm not going to be hypocritical. And there I explained that I'm really not interested in military sense to whatever is happening right now in Israel and Gaza, but that the only point of view which I wanted to look at it was from the point of view of war crimes and crimes against humanity. That's it. Militarily, it's nothing. As was expected, we have a propaganda wave basically going now in Western media talking about how great Israel Defense Force is, despite the fact that it actually literally had it butt handed to it, by this sneak attack, which part of this attack was a pure, simple terrorism on part of Hamas. And so we're going to be in this cycle of narrative, counter-narrative, and all that until people get really tired, non-stop for a while now. And obviously Mr. Biden, who doesn't know what reality he exists in, now begins to talk, that just because Pentagon told him. Actually, I will tell you this. I'm not even sure that Pentagon told him, but he is pretty much the guy who doesn't understand what he is talking about, and he forgets about things. And that brings us to this issue. Yes, in the typical Biden manner, he basically uses, while talking to another sewer, which is American corporate media, I believe it was CBS or ABC, whatever the heck the network of the BS which is there. He was talking about that he wants to put Putin down. Imagine what happens if we, in fact, unite all of Europe and Putin is finally put down where he cannot cause the kind of trouble he's been causing. Biden told interviewer Scott Pelley at one point, arguing that the U.S. has enormous opportunities to make it a better world. No, United States doesn't have enormous opportunities, but the fact is, my title of the class warfare or class struggle for this video is actually tongue-in-cheek, because obviously, we do have class warfare going on right now. It's capitalism after all. It's just that it has very different forms than they were obviously during Marx. But the point is there is a class warfare, and you have basically classless, uneducated, totally uncultured, primitive, what is in Russian called khabalka. Khabal, basically, it's the bazaar or city market, the aggressive sellers. That's what you have in the political top of the United States. And Mr. Biden speaking about Putin and putting him down, it's basically, the term, how it's used. Usually you put down what the rabid dog or cat or something like that. You don't put people down. You kill them, you murder them, but you don't, but that's what is the level of the culture, or rather lack thereof, which permeates the whole political top and intellectual top in the United States. And I've been on that for, as you know, I repeat it over and over again, for many years, that, those people are simply, they don't have class. The only class they have is basically, it's their class interest and how to get more money, cash into their pockets. And in doing so, they have no principles, they have no morals, and most of them, they don't understand even the difference between the right and wrong. And here comes this issue, which is very important for what I'm talking about today, when Mr. Putin, in a classic Putin way, calmly suggested Biden to, just, drink tea with some pancakes. The point is that I learned it relatively recently, that I always thought, sociopath, psychopath, they're interchangeable. Well, it is true that sociopath and psychopath, they do have many things in common. For example, lack of empathy, lack of consciousness. They are really basically people who don't care if you die tomorrow. But the point is, there is a very substantial difference between psychopath and sociopath. Sociopath, unlike psychopath, cannot control its emotions. Psychopaths remain pretty much cold and calculating, and they do have very clear-cut connection to the reality, the same as sociopaths do. But at some point of time, when sociopath encounters the situation that its plans, his or her plans, going awry, then suddenly they begin to lose the nerve, and they begin to behave themselves exactly like you have Mr. Biden behaving, like basically Anthony Blinken behaving. They are basically, in Russians, there is a Russian proverb which says they take the full mouth of their excrement and begin to spit around themselves. This is pretty much how they behave now. The reason they behave, of course, is because of basically geopolitical catastrophe for the United States, especially in terms of the Arab world, who now obviously you know what is happening, and they're all, whatever the remnants of their basically respect or authority the United States had inside the Arab world is gone basically. But eventually it might still kind of roll back. But we already know what is happening with American embassies, and we know that Mr. Biden's visits to Middle East together with and Mr. Blinken was there before. They were just nothing short of catastrophe. Still are. And that brings us to the more practical issue about why I actually was very much in the mode to kind of discount whatever is happening militarily in Gaza Strip. And let me remind you something about Israel's and Israel Defense Force, being so good. This myth has been busted already in 2006, if you remember, especially at the Litany River, where Hezbollah just, made quite a few those incredible, Merkava tanks burn using Russian Cornet and proper defensive tactics. But of course, many people don't remember this. But let me show you. This is SAR-5 class corvette by the Israeli Navy. It's not a very large ship. It's about 1,200 tons of full displacement. It has, those Vulcan phalanx. It has Barak air defense complex, and it can shoot some harpoons. And as you remember, there are 3 of them, which I believe Israeli Navy has. But in 2006, exactly around that time when their covers were burning, we can remember this Hanit. This is the SAR-5 class Hanit corvette of the Israeli Navy, and as you can see yourself, in the back and the stern, it had a very substantial hole, and that was the result of the fact that Hanit was on the patrol around basically Lebanon and coast. And as a result, it was attacked by 2 missiles. One of the missiles, C-802, it's Chinese missiles. I believe they were using the Iranian versions of those. It is a subsonic missile with a range of 120 kilometers, but it missed, and it's actually its warhead kind of captured, active radar warhead captured some other vessel and sunk it. And it missed Hanit completely. But Hanit got hit after that with the C-701, which is a much smaller missile. It has only a range of 25 kilometers and barely 30 kilograms of the TNT in its warhead. But even that, it blew the large hole in the stern of Hanit. It actually killed a number of the people there and damaged quite a few things there. But Hanit was able to somehow, basically limp back to base. Or I don't remember, maybe it was towed. You can look it up. It's not the point. The point is that Hanit, while being at the patrol, had no systems really, including the radar watch wasn't carried out. And all those Barak and Vulcan systems wanted, as always, didn't perform at all. They couldn't intercept even the subsonic anti-shipping missile which Hezbollah shot at it. And guess what? If, however, instead of C-701, it would get hit by C-802, as was initially planned, evidently, by Hezbollah, let me tell you, it wouldn't have the hole. It would have probably the whole stern basically torn away from it, because unlike 30 kilograms of the warhead for this 701, 802 carries up to 140 kilograms of the TNT. And that, for the ship of this size, becomes very serious. And that just to underscore to people who continue to press this agenda that, oh my God, idea of this and that. Well, you saw yourself that actually the only way it is configured to fight, with the exception, of course, of its Air Force, which loves to hide behind civilian aircraft, which is modus operandi, they're basically what is called police force, and that is why they are now basically dragging their feet in terms of what is called the ground invasion of Gaza, because obviously the losses will be high. Will they eventually kind of win or get the control of the situation? Oh, absolutely. They are just simply larger, better equipped, no doubt about it. And of course, they have now United States. And they have those 2 carrier battle groups now in the Eastern Mediterranean. And Mr. Putin didn't mince the words in his meeting at the Brie forum, after, just meeting his good old friend, Mr. Z, and meeting a bunch of other people. Well, that's how Russia is isolated. And he was pretty clear on that. And I warned about it, and now we have this. Mr. Putin says that Russian airspace forces will conduct patrols over the Black Sea with MiG-31Ks fighter jets armed with Kinzhal hypersonic weapons. That's what he stated. And he stated this is not, threat. It's just a warning, just to keep in mind that 2 of the Kinzhals, even in conventional basically warhead variant, they can deal so much. Oh my God, I don't want to go there. That will be really bad. And yeah, there is no anything in terms of air defense, including this one that Aegis, SM-6. They simply, first, they would have very big difficulties seeing them, and they will not be able to intercept them. So this is just in case if somebody, and as I already stated, remember I already told you the difference between sociopath and a psychopath. Psychopaths at least maintain degree of, however often sadistic, that's why very many serial killers are actually psychopaths. They have no empathy, but at least they maintain their actually rational way of thinking and making sure that they themselves, despite the fact that they are not afraid of death, are staying safe. Well, with the sociopaths, it's different. First, they get hysterical, and knowing this, and believe me, I can tell you absolutely clearly that Russian side knows exactly the psychological portraits of every single person in Biden administration. So not to say that, of course, all kind of humorous and, humor and satire magazines in Russia know that too, and they are butt of jokes, but the point is that it's just to make sure that nobody gets any wrong ideas, because with the MiG-31K, with its range of 1,000 kilometers, plus at another 2,000+ kilometers range of Kinjal, essentially flying in the middle, in the international airspace in the middle of the Black Sea, Russia can actually control eastern and central Mediterranean up to the Sicily. So, and there's nothing which will be able to stop the salvo of Kinjals. And this was actually stated by Mr. Putin very clearly, to make sure that this whole thing remains actually under control. Plus, there are, of course, Khmeimim Air Base, and now we have Su-34s, which can carry Kinjals. So it's a lot of things to discuss in terms of what is called military porn, but I wanted to, against the whole background of this and basically dying, well, they're not dying, they're already dead. They just kind of like in convulsion and rot away. They just, this way, smell the putrid smell of the corporate media in the West. They are dead, basically. But we still have to kind of go around, and you see, that's what I do, just go and look at what they try to say, because it is important, because in some sense it reflects the very difficult mental state of the current political elite in the United States. And let's start with the things which are downright funny. And obviously Janet Yellen, she just spoke to Congress, and what she says. Yes, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said on Monday that Washington can certainly afford to support wars on two separate fronts, saying that its coffers are in good shape to continue backing U.S. interests overseas in its support for Ukraine and amid ongoing tensions in the Middle East. Well, I have news. Janet Yellen, obviously being the product of America economics, quote-unquote, education, she doesn't know anything about this, because United States doesn't have really coffers. What United States has is a printing press. And that thing really begins to kind of bear on the situation with any military capability grossly overrated, grossly embellished by the United States, the same as the United States in Israel grossly embellished their military capabilities. But Yellen certainly doesn't understand what she's talking about, because the United States doesn't have resources to conduct even half war. And I'm talking about real war. But then again, you cannot explain the graduate of Harvard in economics or Georgetown in international relations what real war is. They do not understand. They do not have toolkit, and those professors who teach them there, they are as ignorant as their students. So, but then of course she actually goes out and makes a very startling, startling admission that, well, you know what, which I've been on the record for basically a year now about that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has claimed that direct economic aid from the U.S. enables Kyiv forces to fight. Today, Washington has already approved at least $113 billion in aid to Kyiv, including over $140 billion in military assistance, according to the recent calculations from the U.S. State Department Office of Inspector General. And she basically says what we know. Yeah, I've been to Ukraine. I can tell you that the direct economic aid that we are providing to them is what enables them to fight this war. It keeps hospitals open, it keeps schools open, and support first responders. Well, in other words, Ukraine on its own doesn't exist as the functional state, which I've been on it for about a year. Before that, it kind of was like that, but now, since a year ago, it all became very clearly, and now United States is just basically having additional state to maintain, so, and hey, if they think that they can handle it, good luck with that. But the point is, it's not even the rumblings in the Congress, all that, and that some Republicans who have at least some consciousness left, who say that, you cannot do this when the country actually economically inside the United States is being torn at the seams. But you know what? They will continue to support it for now because they cannot withdraw that immediately, because you already know there's a huge egg on the America's face in terms of it's the adventurism in Ukraine, and it's the military defeat which already happened. And only people who lie through the teeth, or people like Biden, they believe that, American journalists, they believe that there's something happened like this BS attacks on Berdyansk, which nobody really suffered. There were no any serious damage, but they said they're like, 9 helicopters, 50 Su-35s, 2 armored brigades have been, typical Ukrainian propaganda, which is immediately spread by the American media, because they have nothing else to go on, because otherwise they will have to basically admit that United States sustained, Afghanistan is not even in the same league, and I've been on this non-stop because United States had its military combined arms, what they thought that they're good at, the whole concept, the whole technological approach, the whole TOE, table of organization and equipment, the tactics, the operational art. United States doesn't really have operational art, let alone strategic planning of the good level. It was completely defeated. It was, humiliated beyond the point, and that's what is happening right now. They need to maintain some kind of the balance, obviously, because some people, and believe me, yes, I totally believe, a bunch of people in Seattle or New York will vote for Biden in 2024. They don't care, and that's why I want to bring us to this important thing. And let me remind you something. I've been on it for so long, but you have to constantly maintain this focus on how catastrophic. It just, I cannot imagine, I can imagine, I don't have enough descriptive powers to explain to you the catastrophe in which American intellectual or establishment in terms of the military and foreign policy is basically disintegrated completely. And here we have Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, former, of course, Council of Foreign Relations guy, he's 90 years old. This is Thomas Graham, as you can see yourself, that he wrote the book, which was published by some kind, I don't know, some kind of publishing house, and it's called Getting Russia Right, Thomas Graham. And here it's obviously promoted by the Council on Foreign Relations, and Thomas Graham offers a practical vision of US-Russia relations. I read the article, which came out in Politica. Politica is one of those the propaganda outlets, and here Thomas Graham, who allegedly knows Russia, I can tell you immediately, he doesn't. He is 90 years old. He's been into the foreign policy establishment since 1970 through 1991. That means he completely lost any touch with the current reality. And of course, basically the toolkit which is given to American diplomats is not applicable to any kind of military political analysis on the serious level. They simply are that giftless. They simply don't have the proper operators to understand what is going on. And here we have this article in Political, which he writes, and they wrote actually based on his book, that Russia will survive a defeat in Ukraine. It's time to prepare for what comes next. We need to figure out how to harness its power to American purposes in the global arena. And there Mr. Graham starts to talk about those, beaten to death cliches that, of course, Russia will survive no matter what, and here he writes that win, lose, or draw, Russia is not going to disappear as a major challenge. Despite some Western pundits' breathless predictions, the chances of Russia breaking up as a consequence of the war are negligible. And so he talks about his Soviet experiences, and yeah, sure, why not? Of course, it's very interesting to read what was happening in the Soviet Union from the point of view of American negotiate on some arms controls, but then he gets to this point and he says, in this emerging order, the challenge for the United States is not to defeat Russia as much of the American foreign policy establishment would now have it, but rather to skillfully exploit relations with the rival to construct a new global equilibrium that advances American interests. exist. To do that, United States needs to see Russia plainly and without sentiment. Getting Russia right, as so often in the past, still remains critical to American future. And what rival is he talking about? Well, guess what? He is talking about China, of course, where basically Vladimir Putin now is visiting, and he already had a very long and indifferent kind of compliment of the negotiators, and then private, very long conversation with his friend Z. But Mr. Graham, evidently he doesn't understand, and again, he's a lawyer, okay? He has a law degree, he got some bachelor's in the useless garbage like international relations, which they don't really teach with some exceptions. Most of it is a joke in the United States academically. But what happens is that he still believes that you can go and do this triangulation, and you can basically, pry Russia away from China. The problem is the all incredible and massive economic might of China, they do not understand military political issue, and especially they don't understand purely defensive issue, and that defensive issue is the technological issue. And here we have to constantly actually remind those people from those former and present American thinkers that they better take some physics and engineering courses to start with. Nobody asks them to take the military science courses, albeit that would have helped. And of course, none of them attended any military institution. Not that it's any good anymore in the United States, but at least it used to be that you can go and see for yourself how the strategy, how geopolitics is formed, and how the balance of power is formed. But Graham continues to think that they can do that thing, just pry Russia and China away from each other, not understanding that no matter relations, and nobody says that they will always be great, Russia and China are neighbors. But then we come down to this thing. In this particular case, Graham pretends to be the obviously so-called realist, by the way. But here is what Hans Morgenthau in 1957 already stated, what Russians finally understood clearly. It never was anti-Soviet. All of it was always Russophobic and anti-Russian. And here's Hans Morgenthau doing his Spruance lecture in U.S. Naval War College in 1957. And the lecture was called, of course, on realism in international politics. And here you have. I would say, and I have said many times before, that if the Tsar still reigned in Russia, that if Lenin had died of the measles at an early age, that if Stalin had never been heard of, but the power of the Soviet Union were exactly what it is today, the problem of Russia would be for us by and large what it is today. If the Russian army stood exactly where they stand today, and if Russian technological development were what it is today, we would be by and large confronted with the same problems which confront us today. There you go. This has been already stated many, many decades ago, and it's all clear. It never was about communism or class warfare. It was always against Russia. It was always against Russian people and people of different nationalities, which are commonly known in the West as Russians, and this was actually to destroy Russia. Russians finally got the message. That's what they don't understand. And there is another thing which they might not know. Actually, Russians have now more resources than Soviet Union ever had. And economically, what is happening, that's the whole thing. You cannot explain this to Janet Yellen. You cannot explain that people who operate, and there are a number of them, they still go out and use those ridiculous GDP numbers, basically of America's almost entirely service economy, with some industrial sectors remaining here and there, like airspace, commercial airspace and military airspace. Yes, it is still in the United States. But if you look at the dynamics of the technological development of the United States, you increasingly see it's actually winding down, and we have now new generation of Zoomers who do not know what basically screw in the light bulb. And this is almost not any more exaggeration or embellishment. They literally the only thing they know is how to operate the iPhone. That's pretty much it. And we are looking at the complete infantilization and basically sociopathization of not only the elites but the society as a whole. That's the point. Who are you gonna vote for? Show me normal candidates. Well, RFK Jr., maybe, but then again, you know what, American establishment is completely in the pockets of the lobbyists, be them Israeli, be them Arab, what have you. Now, Ukrainization of the American foreign policy has happened already. It was happening during Trump already. And now what you have? You have the country which is barely governed, and then, of course, suddenly you have Mr. Graham talking about, you know, getting Russia right. I have news for them. They didn't even get it right during the Soviet times, because obviously they've been living on the Solzhenitsyn-ified version of Russian history. And the same as the Israeli lobby promotes here Israel's interest in United States, or Germans, especially Mansteins, Guderians, and all of them. They wrote history of the World War II for the United States military, essentially. And then you have now what? You had white immigration, Russian white immigration, which wrote the history of the Soviet Union for the elites, which is taught in Harvard anyway, or even in the intelligence schools in Garmisch in Germany, where a bunch of the American and other NATO officers went through educating therefore about Russia. Basically, they were constantly detached from the reality. And when Mr. Graham talks about getting Russia right, how about they getting America right? Because neither Mr. Graham with his 90 years, or let alone Kissinger, or anyone, any from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, or what have you, let alone in the State Department, they do not understand what is happening. They have no grasp of the catastrophe which this country, the United States, was brought from the heights of its influence, which was even so manifest even 30 years ago. Not there anymore. And what is happening in Gaza is the private manifestation, however tragic, however bloody, of the dissolution of this old Pax Americana. And you know what? We're going to be talking about the results of the BRIC forum in Beijing very soon. Russia and China signed colossal deal, $25.5 billion for the grain. And there is another thing which is related to the technology transfers, but that's a separate story. And this is what I wanted to tell you today. And this is kind of it for today. And as always, guys, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on Patreon and buy me a coffee too. That will help me to maintain or continue doing what I'm doing. And so have the nice rest of the week. And I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye-bye.